Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming out, and welcome to Real Talk, though. My name is Taya Graham, and I am an investigative journalist for the Real News Network. I was just curious, how many of you have come to Real Talk, though, before? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Welcome back. We really appreciate it. For those of you who are new here, I'll just tell you a little bit about The Real News. The Real News is a non-profit news organization, and we're completely independent, which means we do not take advertising money. We do not take money from corporate donors. We only accept donations from individuals like you. If you are feeling inspired, we have Katie with the red hair with white envelopes. Maybe she can wave her hand. If you want to give a contribution this evening, you certainly can. Any amount is appreciated. Or you can do it from the privacy of your own home. Just go to therealnews.com and then click on the big yellow donate button. So let's talk a little bit about Real Talk, though. The reason why we're here, the reason why we're having this event is because it's an opportunity for us to open our newsroom to the community so that we can find out what kind of stories are important to you, what kind of stories matter, and what kind of stories you want us to do. So that's why we're here, and that we're hoping through this discussion and through bringing in guests that maybe we'll be able to come up with some of the solutions to deal with the problems that are facing our city. Tonight, Jezl Noor, our veteran journalist at The Real News here, will be our host, and I'm going to turn things over to him. Thank you.
So I want to thank you all for joining us. This is our 9th episode of Real Talk. As Taya said, this is our community conversation and newsroom show. I'm filling in for Eddie today because he's out sick with laryngitis, so we should all be sending him our healing thoughts so he gets better soon. The topic of today's conversation is, it's about what immigrants in Baltimore are facing today. We've all seen images of the children at the border. We've heard the stories in their own voices and in the media about just the horrific conditions they're facing. The conditions have been compared to concentration camps. Meanwhile, our president, Donald Trump, has threatened to deport maybe 1 million people. And he says that those deportations might be imminent. So we're going to be hearing from our panel of experts tonight. We're going to be talking about what the impact of this rhetoric and these policies have had on people right here in Baltimore, our neighbors, and what we can do about it, what information we need to know to be informed citizens, and how we can take action. So before we get started with our panel, we're going to turn to a report that breaks down what's happening across the country and right here in Baltimore, and gives a little introduction about this issue. So here we go.
They gave us little food. Some children did not bathe. They didn't bathe them. They treated us badly where we were.
Like I say, I was one of them. I was there. Like it was like that place was really cold. The food was really disgusting, and I was really scared that I was gonna be deported.
Images of children and families at the border locked in cages have sparked outrage across the country. On Monday, the UN condemned the dangerous conditions, citing allegations of widespread neglect and sexual abuse. While continuing to defend its actions at the border, Trump administration officials said raids to round up and deport up to 1 million undocumented immigrants were imminent.
They're ready to just perform their mission, which is to go and find and detain and then deport the approximately 1 million people who have final removal orders.
This has had a dramatic impact on the roughly 20,000 undocumented immigrants in Baltimore, like Fresia and her sister Demi.
But that makes me really sad because like a lot of my people are gonna be deported.
5 years ago, at the age of just 14, Fresia and her sister Demi fled El Salvador to escape gang violence.
We go through like to the house, to the church, to the school, and the same over and over for a lot of years because we were scared. My parents were scared and my grandparents were scared that if like we did like went to the street, there's gonna be somebody there that's gonna harm us.
Now seeking asylum in the United States, Fresia recalls her own experience of being detained at the border under the Obama administration. She said she faced similar conditions,
to the recent images of starving children and families locked in cages.
Like I say, I was one of them. I was there. Like it was like that place was really cold. The food was really disgusting, and I was really scared that I was gonna be deported. And I just didn't want to be a part of my sister, and I always felt that I was gonna be separated from her. Everybody was crying. Some people were like, "Oh, we're gonna get deported," or "What is gonna happen with us? Where are our parents?" And I don't wish no one what happened to me and my sister, because we were like going through a lot of stuff, and sometimes I pray to God to help me to forget all of those people that did something bad to us, even though we didn't do anything back to them.
On June 27th, hundreds rallied in Baltimore against Trump's threatened raids.
Again, how we got to this point where we have literal concentration camps is through programs that have continued to grow over the last really 3 administrations. It's not just a Trump thing. But the Trump administration has been able to use all that and turn it into something horrendous, intentionally, very intentionally. It's not that it got to a point and he had no choice. They are actively working on dehumanizing human beings and scapegoating the poor and dispossessed.
But advocates have made it clear the current crisis didn't start with Trump. Democrats have played a role as well.
What's important to stress as we're going through this primary process is that at minimum, every presidential candidate needs to stand for a platform of reducing detention by at least 75%. The overwhelming majority of people that are being detained have no criminal records, have no violent tendencies. Thousands of them are children.
And advocates say the U.S. must atone for its role in creating the conditions that many like Fresia are fleeing.
Many people are fleeing countries in Central America, fleeing gang violence or state violence or domestic violence. And in many cases, those categories or those circumstances don't fall under the category of reasonable asylum claims under current policy.
Mayor Jack Young has joined leaders of other major cities and vowed to not take part in Trump's raids. Baltimore is considered a welcoming city. Under a new policy announced last week, police will no longer enforce warrants issued by ICE.
Our officers will not ask about immigration status or citizenship under any circumstances.
Police Commissioner Michael Harrison sharply rebuked the Trump administration and argued ICE raids do not make communities safer.
Our immigrants who are victims and who happen to be witnesses to crimes, they can help us do our work. But you can't help us do that work if you're afraid to call, if there's fear of deportation or fear of getting arrested.
Last year, a $200,000 fund was established in partnership with the immigration legal advocacy group CARE Coalition that's helped provide pro bono legal assistance to over 30 city residents. But Baltimore's jails are controlled by the state of Maryland and Republican Governor Larry Hogan. A state corrections department spokesperson told The Real News that it's state policy to inform ICE when releasing individuals with ICE detainers. Over the past 6 months, they said, ICE has picked up 37 out of 39 individuals released from the Baltimore City jail.
Oh, hey, hey! Ho, ho! ICE contracts have got to go!
Activists have also targeted institutions profiting off contracts with ICE, like Johns Hopkins, a demand the university has rejected, citing the academic freedom of its employees. Meanwhile, we can expect the Trump administration to escalate its anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies leading up to the 2020 election. Not only does scapegoating immigrants distract from the policies Trump has embraced to attack workers and exacerbate inequality, sowing fear and division makes it harder for communities to organize and fight for better conditions. For The Real News, this is Jessel Noor.
Okay, so we're going to start off with our panel. On my right is Jared Jascott. He's an immigration attorney based here in Baltimore, and he also works with the group Sanctuary Streets, which he'll talk more about, which accompanies people in detention in the city and that are in court as well. So to his right is Fresia, and you've heard a little bit of her story in the video I did, we sat down for an interview last week, and you're currently applying for asylum. So it's very courageous for you to be speaking out today and you know, just talking and being open with it. So can we all please give her a round of applause? And then last but not least, we have Allison Pendrak, who's with Casa de Maryland. She works with their youth programs. For people that don't know, Casa is a leading immigrant advocacy group here. They work on immigrants and workers' rights, and they're an advocacy organization. And there's a chapter based here in Baltimore that does a lot of leading work on these issues. So again, thank you all for joining us. So let's start with you. And so we heard a little bit of your story, and so thank you for sharing that. That was, you know, obviously very powerful. You came here at the age of 14 without, you know, to rejoin your family that was living here. But, you know, you've experienced a lot of the conditions that we've seen on TV. You were detained at the border, and now you have to. Now you've seen all these threats that Trump is giving about deporting maybe 1 million people. And that's not to say that there haven't been deportations happening over the last 5 years, but can you share with us what your thoughts are tonight and what you want people to know tonight?
Okay. First of all, I'm gonna just gonna translate the stuff that I'm gonna say. It's not that I don't know any English, okay? It's because when I get nervous, I messed up with both languages, okay? Yeah. Bueno, lo que quiero compartir en este momento es lo siguiente.
What she'd like to share in this moment is the following.
Como dijiste, yo vine a la edad de 14 años con mi hermana. Ella es 2 años menor que yo.
Like he was saying, she arrived when she was 14 with her younger sister, who's 2 years younger.
Básicamente, intentamos venir tres intentos para venir aquí a los Estados Unidos y fue muy duro.
She tried to come here 3 times to the U.S., and it was very difficult.
Casi pierdo a mi hermana, casi ella muere en el camino porque ella tiene asma.
She almost lost her sister along the way because she has asthma.
Y no saben qué tan difícil es venir a los Estados Unidos.
You all don't know how difficult it is to come to the U.S.
Nosotros a veces como hispanos y como todo inmigrante no viene a este país solo porque es un país rico.
Latinos and other immigrants don't come to this country always because it's a rich country.
A veces venimos porque queremos escapar de la cruda realidad de nuestros países.
Sometimes they come because they want to escape the cruel reality of their countries.
Y cuando estábamos en la frontera de Texas, bueno, puedo decir como México y Texas, que es Estados Unidos.
And when they were on the U.S.-Mexico border,
los llevaron a un lugar sin siquiera saber qué estaba pasando.
they took them to a place and they didn't know what was happening.
Estuvimos durmiendo ahí en el suelo.
They were sleeping there on the ground.
Estábamos como encerrados en una caja.
They were enclosed in a box.
Como no cajas, sino que
like a cell? Yeah. A cell, not a box.
Okay. Y básicamente estábamos en unas pésimas condiciones.
They were in horrible conditions.
Y si ustedes tienen hijos, nunca les desearía que pasaran por eso.
And if you have kids, you would never want them to go through what she went through.
Nosotros no teníamos cobijas y estaba muy frío.
They didn't have blankets and it was very cold.
¿Saben los que los daban para que los acobijáramos?
You know what they gave them for blankets?
¿Alguien quiere como opinar acerca de eso?
Does anyone want to guess or give their opinion?
Bueno, lo voy a decir rápidamente.
She's going to say it quickly.
Nos dieron
unos aluminio para que los arropáramos en el frío.
They gave them aluminum to cover themselves.
And to be clear, you're talking about being detained in the United States on the
Yeah.
border.
Okay. Y bueno, y a comenzar a responder la pregunta de él.
And to begin answering the question,
Bueno, quería dar un poco de mi historia
she
primero.
wants to give a little bit of her story first.
Yo nunca me quejé por la comida que me daban,
She never complained about the food they gave her
porque siempre es una bendición.
because it's a blessing.
Otras personas no lo podían tener.
Some people don't get to eat.
Entonces yo estaba agradecida que tan siquiera me daban algo.
So I was grateful that they at least gave me something.
Y estoy un poco triste
And I'm a little bit sad
de que muchas personas van a ser deportadas.
that many people are going to be deported.
La razón es
The reason is
de que muchas personas vinieron a este país porque corrían peligro en sus países.
because many people come to this country because they have danger in their countries.
Y si ellos van nuevamente, van a morir.
And if they go back to their countries anew, they will die.
No es que ellos hayan hecho algo malo.
And it's not because they've done something bad.
En muchas veces las maras, yo soy de un pequeño país en Centroamérica.
It's because of the gangs in Central America.
Bueno, yo soy de un país llamado El Salvador.
She's from El Salvador.
Y quizás muchos ignoran de que hay muchas maras ahí que si ellos matan, ellos hacen lo que ellos quieren y ellos trabajan con las policías.
The gangs do what they want and they collaborate with the police there.
Algo loco, ¿verdad?
That's crazy, right?
Y lógico. Y el gobierno ha robado a nuestra comunidad, a nuestro país, millones de dólares.
And the government has robbed the country of millions of dollars.
Y es por eso que el país no es un país de oportunidades y es uno de los países más peligrosos de todo el mundo.
And that's why the country has no opportunities and it's one of the most dangerous countries.
Imagínense que muchas personas van a ser deportadas nuevamente. Donald Trump quizás no tiene empatía hacia esas personas.
So you can imagine that when many of the people get deported, Donald Trump doesn't have empathy for those people
Porque él no ha estado en sus zapatos.
because he's not in their shoes.
Y todos tenemos una opinión y yo respeto su opinión, créanmelo.
And everyone has an opinion and she respects your opinion.
Pero algo que sí le voy a decir de que estamos volviendo a repetir la historia nuevamente.
But she says that we're repeating history again.
Sabemos que los judíos estaban en centros de concentración, campos de concentración.
We know that the Jewish people were in concentration camps.
Algo similar a lo que los niños están pasando y están siendo separados de sus familias.
And this is similar to what the children are experiencing today, being in these centers and being separated from their families.
Lo que sí te voy a decir es,
But what I'm going to say is,
nadie merece
no one deserves
que les quiten la oportunidad de tener un mejor futuro.
that someone takes away their opportunity to have a future.
Y quizás voy a decir un montón de cosas, pero ya quiero cortar porque yo soy una persona muy platicadora y quiero quizás abarcar bastantes cosas, pero no puedo.
She said that she's a very talkative person and she's saying a lot of things.
Y quizás me van a ver que estoy dando una vuelta en toda la pregunta,
And maybe she's going around the whole question.
pero quiero darles una idea de lo que es ser un emigrante de este país.
But she wants to give you an idea of what it's like to be an immigrant in this country.
Muchas personas que son de México o de otras partes del mundo que no tienen papeles son muy inteligentes.
Many of the people from Mexico and other countries around the world are very intelligent and they don't have papers.
¿Y qué podemos hacer acerca de eso?
And what can we do about this?
Eso es algo que ustedes tienen que pensar.
This is something that you all need to think about.
Y no solo como un individuo, sino como una comunidad, y no solo una comunidad, sino que todo el país.
And not just one person, but a community. And not just a community, but the whole country.
Este país fue fundado por inmigrantes.
This country was formed by immigrants.
Todos somos inmigrantes.
We're all immigrants.
Y el que me diga que no, yo le puedo decir con su color de piel de que sí es un inmigrante. Yo soy inmigrante, él también.
So everybody is an immigrant.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. And so part of why we're here is to think about and discuss what we can all do to help address this crisis we're having in this country. So that's going to be a big part of this conversation. So I want to turn to you, Allison. So you work with youth that have similar stories like this across the city. How common are stories like this, and what impact does this have on people? You know, are people afraid to go to school? Are people afraid to get health care because of these new threats of deportation?
Fresia's story is actually very common among many of the students that come to CASA's youth program and go to high schools in the city of Baltimore. And I constantly receive text messages and calls from my students like, Miss Allison, is it safe to go to school today? I heard this, or I heard that rumor, or Miss Allison, is it safe to go to this doctor or that doctor, or talk to this lawyer, or just different questions that reflect the state of fear that immigrants and immigrant students are living in today. That's definitely been heightened by the rhetoric of President Trump. Not to say that in the past administrations there weren't deportations or there weren't raids, but the way that the Trump administration has been targeting all immigrants, regardless of if they have a criminal background, has definitely heightened the fear in the community, and has been reflected in the conversations I've been having with my students.
Thank you. So Jared, we heard a lot. We've heard a lot so far about different issues that people face in this country. You're an attorney. I wanted to start off by asking you, what do you say to people that say, you know, people that are undocumented should be waiting in line, and that they don't have a right to be here? They should get in line like everyone else. That's a common refrain that we hear from people that support these deportations and these raids that we're seeing across the country.
They rarely say it to me, I'll say. You know, Fresia's in the line, right? So there is a line for asylum, and there's a literal line if you go to the United States border, for instance, Tijuana, if you go to any of the border towns in Texas. And in fact, the line is so long now that what you do is you go up to the border, put your name in a book, and they give you a number. Then every day you go back to the United States border, and they tell you if your number's called. It's completely illegal. There's no part of that in the United States law, but the United States government is paying the Mexican government to enforce that because we can't do it. So we pay the Mexicans to do it. They're in that line. They wait in that line for 3 to 4 months in Mexico, in the border towns, which are incredibly dangerous. Then they come here. They ask for asylum. They're in another line. So I think the first most important thing is that most of the people we're talking about in this particular crisis that's happening right now, they're all in line right now. They're in it. They're following the law. They're doing exactly what they should be doing.
And Allison, what do you say to people that want to get involved and that want to help out in the work that you're doing and that CASA is doing and that other groups are doing across the city? And also, what should people know if ICE comes knocking on their door?
Yeah, in terms of something that allies or people in Baltimore City can do, number one is to be informed. So if you see a Know Your Rights or bystander training pop up, there's events on Facebook. CASA has been hosting them. We don't have another one scheduled right now. But if you do see that, I would definitely participate in that so you know exactly what to do and how to help your immigrant neighbors. Another thing, if you do see a raid happening, is to call CASA's hotline, which is 1-855-678-CASA 2272. And yeah, it's 1-855-678-CASA 2272. That's CASA 2272. And another thing you can do is to videotape the scene, basically. Don't try to interfere with the justice that's happening, but you can videotape it and try to gather any information you see, license plate numbers, agent names that are involved in the scene. And if you do have immigrant friends that you are close with or comfortable with, ask for their name and date of birth, because if they are detained, organizations like CASA can look up where they're being detained with ICE. That's information that's on ICE's website. Yeah.
And so, just so everyone knows, in a few minutes, we're going to open this up for your questions. So there's a microphone in the back, and Taya will be helping coordinate that. So if you have any questions, please write them down, and we'll try to get to everyone before the night is up. So Jared, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the other side of this issue. We're talking about the impact here in the United States, but a big part of the reason why people are coming to this country, especially from Latin America and Central America, is because of the role the U.S. has played there for decades. Doing things like funding death squads, helping organize coups against democratically elected governments, that, governments and movements that wanted to break the grip the elite there had over the control of these countries, something that's existed since colonial times, really. And so you've seen a lot of people like Fresti are coming here from countries like El Salvador, where the U.S. sponsored death squads in the 1980s, or Nicaragua, where the UN ruled that the U.S. was carrying out war crimes and an illegal war against that country for them having the Sandinista government, which opposed U.S. foreign policy and wanted independent development there. Or Guatemala, where the U.S. supported a coup there in the 50s and backed a genocide there in the 80s. So talk a little bit about this. What role has the U.S. played in this crisis, and is there a way for the U.S. to make amends now with its immigration policy? You see people fleeing violence to this day.
So I was, right after college, I actually lived in El Salvador, probably about 10 kilometers from where Fresia was born. So we kind of have a very similar perspective. And I think El Salvador is really a unique country, and its role in all this is super interesting, because in the 80s, like you mentioned, there was a war in El Salvador in which the left attempted to come into government. The United States government funded the right-wing government, gave them all kinds of weapons. And because of that, really, we destroyed all the infrastructure, just made it really hard to work. And what happened was 1/4 of the Salvadoran population came to the United States. There's 6 million people in El Salvador and 2 million Salvadorans that live in this country. And over half their GDP is remesas, money sent from the United States back to El Salvador. Now, a lot of Salvadorans that are here actually would prefer to go back to El Salvador, or at least be able to go back and forth. But because they're undocumented, they're kind of stuck here. And so what that did is it started to create a huge vacuum in which all the people of working age were here, and all their little kids and their parents who started to become elderly were there. And in that power vacuum started to get filled by people that were being deported from the United States. So that left a ton of old people, a ton of little kids, and a ton of hardened criminals that learned to be criminals in the United States. Slowly that group just started to dominate towns. Fresia can probably speak to this.
That's what she fled from.
Yeah, the primary scheme in El Salvador is something called renta. So they come to your house, your neighbor, and they say, hey, you got to give me $50 or I'm going to kill you. So then after a while, you run out of $50. So you're like, you know, I can't deal with this. I don't want to die. You come to the U.S. They go to the next house. Before you know it, the whole village has to leave because psychotic 15-year-olds are killing everyone. I mean, and I think, Fresia, if you want to talk a little bit more, I mean, about sort of what it felt like in your town, I think it could give people a pretty good flavor of why people walk away from a country and a culture they know and come here.
Okay, voy a explicar eso rápidamente. Es una buena pregunta.
She's going to explain that briefly because it's a good question.
Básicamente, cuando yo me crecí con mi bisabuelo.
When she grew up with her great grandfather.
Descendiente judío.
He was a Jewish descendant.
Y básicamente toda la comunidad era bien tranquila desde el comienzo en mi niñez.
Everyone in the community was really peaceful during her childhood.
Pero después, poco a poco, comenzaron a llegar las maras.
But after little by little, the gangs started arriving.
Y básicamente comenzaban a reclutar a niños de 7 años, niños tan inocentes.
And basically they began recruiting 7-year-olds, very innocent children.
Para comenzar a que ellos siguieran sus pasos.
So that they would begin to follow in their footsteps.
Y matar gente.
And kill people.
Y básicamente miraban una niña bonita en la calle.
And basically they would see a little nice girl in the street.
Ellos iban a decir, esta muchacha la vamos a agarrar para que se venga conmigo, ella va a ser mi mujer.
And they would see the girl and say, she's coming with me, she's going to be my girl.
No tenían opción.
And there was no other option.
Y si esa muchacha no se iba con esa persona, aunque tenía 14, 13 años,
and if the girl didn't go with that guy, even though she only was 14,
podían matar a su familia y la violaban y la mataban a ella también.
They would kill the family and rape her and then kill her.
Así era la situación en El Salvador.
And that was the way it was in El Salvador.
Y los policías no hacían nada.
And the police did nothing.
Porque tenían miedo de que también las maras mataran a sus familias.
Because they were also afraid the gangs would kill their families.
Y también sabemos que el país, El Salvador es un país muy pobre.
And we also know that El Salvador is a very poor country.
En mi tiempo, en mi niñez, ganaban como aproximadamente $10 la hora. El día, perdón. El día.
In my country during that time, people would earn $10 a day.
Y eso era muy poco. Y eso que trabajaban de construcción.
And this was very little, and this was in construction work.
Y otros ganaban $1 y algo al día.
And then some people earn $1 a day.
Imagínense que viene un hombre de mara en su casa y tú no tienes dinero.
Imagine a gang member comes to your house and you don't have money.
Y te dice, dame $50.
And they tell you, give me $50
O mato a toda tu familia.
or I'll kill your whole family.
¿Qué tú harías?
What would you do?
¿No escaparías acaso?
You wouldn't escape from your house
y salvar a tus hijos
and save your kids
o tu hermano
and your brother
o tus padres ancianos.
and your elderly parents.
¿No harían eso acaso?
You wouldn't do that as well?
Y a veces es muy difícil ponerse en nuestra posición cuando venimos a Estados Unidos.
And sometimes it's difficult to put yourselves in our position when we come to the U.S.
Muchas personas vienen acá y no son criminales.
Many people come here and they're not criminals.
Básicamente huyen de la triste realidad,
Basically, they're fleeing from the sad reality,
que es de sobrevivir
that is to survive
o morir.
or die.
Y otra cosa que quiero agregar es la siguiente.
And another thing she wants to add is the following.
Sin contar la corrupción de nuestro gobierno, que lo comenté desde el inicio.
Without saying the corruption of the government,
Cada presidente que se postulaba
every president that takes their place
robaba millones de dólares.
robbed millions of dollars.
Y ese dinero ni siquiera era del país.
And that wasn't from the country.
A veces ese dinero se lo prestaba a otros países, a El Salvador.
Sometimes it was money that was loaned from other countries to El Salvador.
El Salvador está endeudado con otros países. Endeudado.
Oh, El Salvador is very indebted to other countries,
Y es muy triste
and it's very sad
que personas que comienzan desde niño comienzan a estar en las maras.
that kids start from a very young age
Y voy
to
a com-
join the gangs.
Voy a compartir una historia bien corta, rápidamente.
And she's going to share a short story.
Yo estaba en segundo grado.
When she was in second grade,
Yo tenía una amiga que era una persona muy alegre.
she had a friend who was a very happy person.
Y en una ocasión ella estaba jugando en la calle.
One time they were playing in the street,
Y una persona la agarró porque había una balacera y estaban queriendo matar a un hombre que creo que estaba en una mara.
and there was a gunfight because they were looking for a man.
Y ese hombre agarra a mi amiga
And the man grabbed her friend,
y la usa como escudo,
and they used her like a shield,
un escudo humano.
a human shield.
Y le balacearon todas sus piernas. Sus piernas.
Oh, and they shot all over her legs,
Y básicamente ella quedó paralítica.
and she became paralyzed.
Ya no era la misma persona que yo conocí cuando estaba en segundo grado. Estábamos en el mismo grado todavía, dejó de ir a la escuela.
They were in the same grade, and she stopped going to school because she became a different person.
Ya no era lo mismo.
She wasn't the same.
Imagínense todas esas cuestiones que yo miré desde muy pequeña y eso que no salía tanto. Yo me crecí en un lugar cristiano
She was raised in a Christian place,
y siempre iba a la casa, a la escuela y a la iglesia.
she always went to her house, the school, and the church.
La misma rutina siempre.
Always the same routine.
Y nunca salía de mi casa si no era la iglesia
And she never left her house if it wasn't the church
o la escuela.
or school.
Y en ocasiones querían que dejara de ir de la escuela porque era una situación muy peligrosa.
And sometimes she didn't want to go to school because it was a very dangerous place.
Y si yo quería ir a la ciudad, a cada rato miraba a personas robándole las carteras a personas, haciendo desastre.
And if she wanted to go to the city, she would see people robbing people, and it was a disaster.
Por eso nunca me dejaban salir.
And that's why they never let me go out of my house.
Entonces esas son las cosas que nosotros vivimos en nuestros países.
And that's what she had to live through in her country.
Entonces eso es lo que él estaba hablando desde el comienzo, de las rentas.
And that's what he was talking about the rent, la renta.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So we have about 45 minutes left in our program. So if people want to start lining up for questions, you can start doing that now. And Taya is going to help facilitate the audience questions. We ask that you keep your questions to 2 minutes. So just to make sure everyone has a chance to ask their questions and their concerns. So if you guys can start lining up now. And Allison, I wanted to ask you, so this, as we heard in the report earlier, the city just unveiled a new policy, and we have someone from the city here that can answer more questions, but if you want to just to touch a little bit about that. From my understanding, police officers will no longer ask about people's immigration status, and they will not enforce warrants that are administrative warrants from ICE. And is that correct? Yeah, that is correct. And so what impact is that going to have on the city? And is that going to help decrease the level of fear that people have just living their ordinary lives, do you think?
Yeah, so this new policy within the police department is a major win for the immigrant community. And Baltimore before was a welcoming city. There was an executive order that stated that. But the problem with executive orders are that when you move on to a different mayor throughout time, that mayor can take away that executive order, so it's not something permanent. Whereas the new police commissioner and this new policy that's being enacted, this is something more permanent, more ingrained in the work of the police department. It will involve training with officers on how to respond to certain situations. So that's why it's more of a major win, a permanent win for the community.
And it's significant that it's a policy announced by the commissioner because, as we know, the city doesn't control its own police force. And so that's been a topic that's come up in a lot of these conversations, and that's an issue that people are working on at a state level. But the fact that the commissioner announced this, I think, is significant. And we'll have to, of course, keep an eye on how this is being enforced. We know the police department has, it's under consent decree and faces a lot of issues of accountability within its ranks. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. But Taya.
I have someone here. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Abby. My friend Opal, who's also in line, and I went last week to the border, to El Paso, to Clint for the 4th of July. We're holding up signs and banners and such. On our way there, we found out about a crowdfunding movement called Citizen Presence, #Citizen Presence, that's to help people get down there. And so on our way back, we were thinking about how we could do more of that. Could we rent a van? Could we take people down in larger numbers? And so my question was, do you all know of other people doing that who we should be talking to? And I should say, if anybody here tonight is interested in that, please feel free to come by and talk to me. But also, do you think that an action like that is impactful? And if so, how could it be the most impactful? What do we do,
I mean, I've been down to the border a number of times, and I'm in pretty good contact with a lot of the attorneys that are down there. It's a tricky situation for regular people because any sort of behavior that you engage in could be considered human trafficking. We've actually seen a number of volunteers that have been prosecuted by the Trump administration for leaving water for folks. So it's tough. I would be interested to talk to you more after too about what you saw, because sort of on the U.S. side, we've got all these private prisons and these really sealed facilities. So it's a little opaque in terms of what you can see and how you can have an impact. In Mexico, I mean, the most amazing thing for me, and I'm sure that you saw the same, is that on the U.S. side, it can be heavily fortified. It feels as if we're about to be invaded by some great army. And when you go into Mexico, people are just very calm, sitting at cafes. And supposedly on that side is what we're waiting for. But there's really nothing over there. It's just sort of a dog and pony show for the people in Kansas. So You know, down at the border, I know a lot of people want to take action, but I think that it's a pretty tough place to make an impact. Here in Baltimore, there are a lot more opportunities that you can dig into. And I think that it's really more meaningful in some ways to make an impact in Baltimore in that you're helping your neighbors, you know, and that begins to integrate the community and bring ties between us. That's the real reason that I want to help immigrants, and I imagine most of you do too, is that you really feel a bond between them as fellow human beings and fellow Baltimoreans.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be a proponent of certain laws that are being passed and participate more in Washington and at the city level and support rallies that are actually changing laws. While I do think it is meaningful to go to the border, to see the situation, and maybe support laws down there in those states, I think it's also important to recognize that things you do in Washington, which is close to here, and things you do in Baltimore are also extremely impactful for the immigrant community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Yes,
please. Hi, I'm Cindy Farquhar, and thank the four of you for what you brought us tonight. In terms of Baltimore, the two things I'm wondering about are, number one, even people who don't speak Spanish, going to arraignments, that may not be the right word, or magistrates' appointments with immigrants to ask for more time to prepare their case, because I understand that people who are not private immigration lawyers, in other words, NGOs who do this, are booked for months and months ahead. You can't even get in the door to see these people. So that would be the one thing, is for people to go with immigrants and just simply be saying to the judge, this person cannot build a case to defend their right to be here, to be a relief seeker, until there is something more that can be done for them. That's one. The other one is that there are groups in many cities from the border to here which help people along the way, bus groups. So if you all know of bus groups, if the possibility exists in Baltimore, I wonder, especially I'm looking at CASA, if you all are interested in doing things about bus groups, which would consist of a greeter who can speak to the migrants and a group of providers who can provide things along the way, be it all the way from coffee to winter coats when it was winter. Thank you.
Yeah, so there is a group in Baltimore that is already doing something like that in both of those senses, in terms of accompanying people to their court appointments and also assisting with bus routes and things of that nature. They're called sanctuary streets. So if you are interested in volunteering in that regard, I would definitely reach out to Sanctuary Streets.
And as far as, I don't know if, I think your question asked about legal representation. And last year, the city launched a program called Safe City Baltimore, where they partnered with groups like Care Coalition to provide free legal representation for city residents that are undocumented, that are facing legal proceedings.
And I understand they're totally booked through October.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you want to go to court with an immigrant and represent them at trial table, and you don't have a law license and you don't speak Spanish, that is about to become possible in Baltimore. We need people to do it. Yeah, it's going to be really cool. Baltimore is going to be one of the first places that does it. We're going to have to be very smooth and delicate about the way that we do it. There's going to be a fair amount of training because we want it to work and we want it to be an example for the rest of the country. The folks that are being classified as family units right now by the Trump administration they're attempting to force them to go to trial in an asylum case in under a year. They don't have the money to do that, and it's really difficult to get evidence out of El Salvador in that time frame. So we are going to be training people to go to court with immigrants, even if they don't speak Spanish. The other thing that you can do is we're going to be sending people into court to just count different outcomes. So you're going to have an app, and you can just listen to what the person says, listen to what the judge says, record it, upload it. That sort of data is super important. And it's something that doesn't require you to have to go up to trial table or speak Spanish. The whole court is in English. So there's two super meaty opportunities for people that want to do direct service, and we need your help in Baltimore.
When will it be available?
When can you get trained to do it? This month. Yeah. So if you send a message to Sanctuary Streets on Facebook and sign up, we'll have you be one of the people that get trained for either one of those opportunities.
How you doing? My name is Kywan Jackson, and I'm here with a group with Communities United. My question for you, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for telling your story. For real, you are very brave for that. My question for you was, like, what was the hardest thing about leaving? I know you was escaping terrorism, but what was the hardest thing leaving your own country? What was the hardest thing for you to leave behind?
I think everything was really hard, but the hardest part was like leaving the place that I really love and I grew up. It was like so heartbreaking. And I didn't want to leave El Salvador, but I didn't have a choice, So it was like survive or, die in my country. And I didn't want that because I have a sister that she came with me. And like I said, she have asthma. Yeah, and like we didn't have medicine, and we didn't have money, and everything was like, I don't know if I'm responding to your question with a good answer, but the only thing that I can say that everything was hard, but the hardest part was, like I say from the beginning, leaving the place that I grew up, yeah.
Thank you very much. You did answer my question. Again, you were very brave. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Hi, my name is Nariman El Said, and I live here in Baltimore, child of immigrants. And firstly, just thank you, Fresia, for sharing your story and your strength, and you and your sister and the rest of the panelists for being here and putting this together. Firstly, I just want to say that I did one of the CASA bystander trainings, and it was worth every second. I learned so much, so I really encourage everybody else to do one. There's some really counterintuitive things that you would think would be helpful, but aren't necessarily, and so CASA will really teach you everything you need to know to be a proper bystander. My question is, and I hope somebody can speak to this, I don't know if people know that Hopkins recently created a private police force. In order to do that, they had to overturn a law in the state of Maryland that prohibited private police forces. So now they have set a precedent that anyone can create a private police force. So how can we put pressure on those private police forces to abide by the same standards that Baltimore City is claiming to so that we can make sure that our undocumented brothers and sisters are safe?
Thank you for that question. And so from my understanding, the police force it's been authorized by the state, but it still needs the final agreement from the city council. So we'll definitely follow up with the city council and Hopkins to see if they'll honor the agreement that the city has with the police department, and inquire about that. So we'll definitely keep you posted on that. Yeah. If anyone else does.
Well, Hopkins does have a working relationship with ICE.
A $1.5 million contract.
Right. So, I mean, I think that it's a great idea that you're coming up with. I think city council is a good place for leverage. I mean, Maryland is a democratically controlled state. We can pass laws at the state level. We could pass a law just like this law that the city of Baltimore just passed. the city of Baltimore could probably also pass a law that could attempt to tie Hopkins' hands on that same thing. So I think that it's a really good point for you to look at.
And I think something important is to be involved and to be informed and attend city council meetings and be an advocate for immigrants, be an advocate to prevent this from happening.
And I guess it's important, it hasn't come up yet, but we talked about the agreement, the new policy that Baltimore City has, but other jurisdictions in the state have cooperation agreements, 287G agreements with the federal government. So they are enforcing, they're checking status. I know there's a big fight in Frederick right now over their sheriff there. And in Baltimore City, the state and Governor Larry Hogan control the jail there. So I contacted them today about about this new policy the city is enforcing with the police department. And they said, what they told me was, their policy is, if someone has an outstanding, what's called an ICE detainer, they're gonna let ICE know when that person is released from jail. And they said over the last 6 months, they've done that for 39 people. 37 of them have been picked up by ICE. So almost everyone has been picked up by ICE. So that is, the jail here, the fact that it's controlled by the state is a major issue. And it continues to be.
Thanks so much.
My name is Ken Morgan, and I have a couple questions. One, or first a comment, I guess, and that is that we seem to be emphasizing that Trump had this problem, when indeed this has been a problem for a long, long, long time for other administrations, including the Obama administration. So I think that we need to put that into some kind of context in reference to, if somebody could respond to that, that would be great. And also, we've talked about some of the aspects that deal with the problems, but there has been historical experiences with demanding amnesty for all. We have a lot of we have many undocumented workers in the United States, as well as those that are trying to get into the United States. And so I think that could you also comment on that and what the struggle will look like in reference to amnesty for all, no deportations, and no raids, in reference to a people's uprising of these kinds of things nationally and internationally.
Yeah, and I think I tried to emphasize, to quickly touch upon the first part of your question. In my story, I tried to emphasize that Trump administration policies are building off of previous administrations, including the Obama administration. And what Fresia faced in being detained at the border, put in a cage with an aluminum blanket, that was under the Obama administration. So these policies we're seeing are not new, but they are being ramped up to levels that we haven't seen in recent memory. So I'll say that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the reason why Trump's name comes up now, besides the fact that he is president now, is because he has a rhetoric of such fear. And it's creating a lot of fear in the community. CASA is constantly receiving calls, asking questions, and there's talk in the community about raids happening in Colombia and all throughout the area. So it's really this sense of fear that I think brings up his name. And also the fact that he is targeting people that the Obama administration didn't necessarily target before, which are people without criminal records, just eating lunch in a park or something like that, which did happen once.
So one of the things that I think that we have to look at, though, is the fact that what can we do about the situation? I mean, as opposed to just a piecemeal kind of thing to put it together. Sanctuary cities are a good thing. At the same time, they're temporary. So why not have at least in Baltimore a wider coalition of folks, no matter whatever hue or color people are, to be able to make these kinds of demands and make it a national, make it part of a national perspective in terms of the fact that the young lady mentioned that we're all immigrants. There are so many historical perspectives on this kind of thing. So, I mean, I want to be a part of something that is going to make significant changes.
And that's a great question, and thank you for that question.
Thank you.
I'll just say that I think we should all be paying attention to the Democratic primary and seeing, immigration has come up during that process. In the debate, we saw Julian Castro call out other Democrats that didn't support changing a policy which made crossing the border a criminal offense. That wasn't always the case, and that was a recent change in the law, which has led to a lot of these prosecutions. So,
it's not your national answer, but it does involve power. I think one thing that Baltimore could do is allow people that live in Baltimore as residents to vote regardless of their immigration status. There is absolutely no reason that all Baltimoreans can't vote in local elections. It has been done in other cities in Maryland. So I think that that's there. As in terms of a broader reform, politicians tend to dodge it, I think, in part because undocumented immigrants aren't constituents. They don't have a vote. And that's who they really care about when they start to get down to, okay, what's the issue that I can actually win on? For instance, with Obama, I mean, he did make a huge move on behalf of immigrants with DACA, and many, many more minor changes that he made were very helpful to immigrants. But what he really put it down, what he did was Obamacare. If the only way that really immigrants are going to be served by the federal government is likely going to be based on demographic data. Latinos will outnumber whites by the year 2035, and they will vote on behalf of their brothers, cousins, neighbors for a large reform. I would love to see it sooner than that, but I think that ultimately it's going to come down to pure demographic data. And that is really why you see broad voter disenfranchisement right now, and lots of other efforts to try to stem the tide of an inevitable demographic gain by Latinos that will likely result in reform.
and it's worth mentioning that a lot of these policies we're seeing the Trump administration implement are sort of the brainchild of Stephen Miller, who's a white nationalist, and that speaks to your point. But also, I think it's worth mentioning that the Obama administration deported more than the previous 7 administrations. He earned the name Deporter in Chief for over the 2 million deportations that he carried out. And some people say that was to sort of appease the more right-wing elements in this country. But despite that, comprehensive immigration reform wasn't passed. So,
But speaking of that, just on a more positive note, a major win we actually just had was that Trump has dropped the citizenship question from the census. So, yeah.
So to clarify, the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court ruled that the justification that the Trump administration was using was insufficient, but they just announced the Trump administration announced they're hiring a new legal team, and they're going to still try to get that question on the census. And I mean, I'll let you guys talk about the significance of that, but I think a lot of people, and I guess it's been revealed in some secret documents that the goal was to have that citizenship question was to decrease turnout in areas with high immigrant populations, which would decrease representation in Congress for those areas, and therefore helping the Republicans as well. Yeah.
And also decrease funding for important services like schools, which would be a major hit to all communities in the United States, especially here in Baltimore. So what I've heard is that they've started printing the censuses already, so I don't think that the lawyers will be able to do anything because they've already started printing the forms. We're considering it a win.
And I just want to remind everyone to please tip your servers. We're being hosted by I2B's Table, and they're graciously letting us use their space, so thank you.
Yes, please be generous. Thank you. And do you mind introducing yourself?
My name is Max Amberger. I work in hospitality in Baltimore City. I think your mention of the workers of this place is a good segue for, I have two things which I want to keep brief here. Working in hospitality for a number of years, one of the things that has become clear to me, I have very many undocumented friends and coworkers, and one of the mechanisms by which a sort of regime of discrimination is made able to be put upon undocumented workers is through organizations variously known as staffing agencies, temporary agencies, which essentially serve as like papers laundering entities for larger corporations to exploit undocumented labor for lower wages, oftentimes far worse working conditions, no recourse for grievance or anything like this. And I've been watching this for years, and I have been wondering if there is any no benefits, no insurance, no nothing, and it honestly enrages me the way that they're treated. And I'm wondering if, first off, if there are any things going on which are aiming to combat this problem. Second off, you also mentioned that the U.S. has played a very negative role in creating the crises in the countries of origin for many undocumented immigrants. And one country which I didn't hear come up was Honduras. Which since the coup against Manuel Zelaya in 2009 has been kind of spiraling further and further into social chaos, accelerating particularly after the electoral coup of Juan Orlando Hernandez. I just want to put that onto the table because right now, especially even since the caravan in October of last year, the situation has deteriorated further and further. We have 300 Hondurans leaving their country every day. And I want to first bring that just to discussion and also to see if there are any, solidarity, organizations, actions that are going on to bring some kind of resolution that can prevent another catastrophe like what happened in El Salvador in the 1980s.
Thank you for that.
So I think it's really important if you hear these stories of workers being exploited to connect them to resources, connect them to lawyers. Regardless of your status, if you're not getting paid an appropriate wage, you should find a lawyer and sue your employer. Workers have that right here. There's some great legal resources like MVLS, who provide free legal representation for workers. In terms of the Honduras question, I haven't heard of any Honduras-specific organizations that are addressing that specific need. But if you can refer immigrants that you know or people that need help to CASA and other immigrant rights organizations, and they can help those people.
I mean, what you brought up about Honduras is super interesting. The Drug Enforcement Agency of the United States has President of Honduras' brother in detention right now for being a drug trafficker. He's obviously tied to his brother. We are actively supporting the Honduran president. I mean, Mike Pence has spoken well of him. There should be, Baltimore, some people in this room might actually have some leverage on that piece. Dutch Ruppersberger is one of the biggest and most powerful players right now in Congress, and he has the power of the purse. The reason that Honduras their regime is being propped up is because we continue to give them money and we continue to support that president. So even though we don't control foreign policy, the Democrats do control the purse. So if Ruppersberger is your representative and you think that you want to talk to him about Honduras, that might be a way that you could get some leverage. It's a gruesome situation that's happening in Honduras right now. I talked to about probably 15 Hondurans today. You can pay a hitman in Honduras $50 to kill someone. You can only imagine that if somebody pays someone $50 to kill your brother, you probably can wrestle up $50 to kill that guy, and pretty quickly you get a lot of dead people.
And I think it's really important to talk about the so-called war on drugs, of course, because we've seen the impact in places like Baltimore, but the impact in countries like in Latin America, we're seeing that because of the demand here and because it is criminalized here. So that's something that we can all take action on and make demands that prohibition, there's something done about prohibition here, because that is fueling a lot of this violence. It's giving money and weapons to a lot of these gangs, and it's giving an excuse for the U.S. military to get involved in a lot of these countries and to transfer a lot of weapons and military training which often end up in hands of people that use them on civilians and help further fuel these crises.
I just wanted to field in a quick question that I got in from the right here. We were talking about the idea of making it possible for undocumented people to be able to vote in our elections. But I was just told that even if you hold a green card, you can't vote, that you have to have citizenship. Is that correct? Yes. That's correct, accurate statement.
Yes.
So even if you have a green card, you can't vote. How difficult wouldn't it be to make it possible for someone who's undocumented to have that same right?
Baltimore City Council could pass the law.
They could.
There's other cities that
Baltimore City Council could pass the law. It's been passed
Does it
in
need to be a
Tacoma Park,
referendum?
Silver Spring.
Or?
It's basically what we would do is we would create a regime by which you were a resident of Baltimore based on some criteria, like yeah,
paying taxes.
Could be an amount of time that you lived here. I mean, for instance, the state of Maryland created a similar regime for driver's license for undocumented immigrants, in which you had to prove that you have 2 years of taxes and residence. So that part of the solution could easily be solved by our clever legislators.
Does that help? Okay, thank you so much. Our next, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Opal. I am one of the founders of the Baltimore Free Farm, an urban gardening collective, and another program called Food Rescue Day, which serves like reclaimed produce that would otherwise go into the waste stream to neighborhoods throughout the city. A commune I was working out in Virginia, they were working with another group who trained them how to provide culturally appropriate meals to Greyhound. People coming in on the Greyhound, like for court dates, no food, no money. You come in and provide food and money. I don't have the name of that group, and I was wondering if there are groups in Baltimore who are doing that work and how I could possibly get aid their way.
I would say get in contact with Sanctuary Streets. They are involved more with the arrival of immigrants to Baltimore, welcoming immigrants as they arrive into Baltimore, and also accompanying them to court.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for your question.
Hi, my name is Robin. Two questions. I'll just put them both out one time. First of all, I'm curious. I've been hearing things about Amazon and their involvement with the digital or database or something. I'd like to know maybe a little more about that. But my main question is, how can we, we all know the rhetoric that Trump is putting out there. It's dehumanizing people, and that in itself is, to me, a very base thing that leads to fascism as well as other things going on. How can we bombard that, change that, getting stories like Fresh as out to the public? I mean, Real News does a great job, but how can we really get people's stories out there so that people can just see the human side of people and what they're going through? And it's not just people wanting to come here to get rich or be criminals or whatever, is being put out there.
Yeah, I think organizations like CASA do a great job of inspiring community members to become leaders and to feel comfortable sharing their stories. Because I would like to applaud Fresia. She's one of my students, and I'm blown away that she's up here with me, and she feels comfortable sharing her stories, because it requires a lot of courage, and sometimes it's not good enough to just say, hey, immigrant neighbor, you come up here with me and we're gonna talk to this reporter about this, about your experience. Even if they've shared it with you personally, a lot of times it comes with a lot of trauma, and it comes with fear of putting your face out there. So a lot of times I think it's important to make sure that when immigrants are sharing their stories, that they have the backing of an organization that can support them legally if something does happen, because we do see that ICE has targeted activists and targeted people that have been willing to show their face. And some of those people right now are seeking refuge in churches because they are on ICE's watch list. So I think that is something to consider when you are inspiring people to share their stories.
Amazon?
AWS, Amazon Web Services, basically powers a large component, larger and larger everyday component of the federal government's infrastructure, digital infrastructure, including ICE. I mean, I heard an interview the other day with the president of AWS. Based on what I heard from him, I don't think that I guess if you all want to stop using Amazon. But I'm not personally willing to make that pledge, so I can't.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gerald Dent, that's my government, but most folks call me Soldier. I guess this question would be directed to Chesil. Every time I leave here, folks is interested in how could they themselves be able to co-chair one of these forums that Real Talk puts together. Do they contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be here after the event. Tay will be here after the event. We want to hear your suggestions for our future programs. We do this every 2 weeks, so we're always looking for ideas from the community about what topics you want to see covered. So come talk to us, and you can message us on Facebook or on Twitter. And yeah, we want to hear from you.
You hear what he said? Come on down.
Yeah.
And I just have one last person. That's okay, Chesil?
So I know I went up before, but I asked, there was no one else in line. Is it okay if I say one more thing? And I was really inspired by the gentleman who was asking, how do we make this a larger national movement? How do we go beyond, little actions? And I guess the question part of this is, philosophically, do you all see a connection between the way we think about the border in America and who's illegal and legal and other sorts of walls and lines and borders and divides in our lives? Because that's what Opal and I have been thinking about a lot. We talked on our road trip back, what if we started an organization called Baltimore for Border Justice, with a circle with a red line through the ICE part. So we would center, the border crisis and the plight of undocumented people, because the oppression, is so intense there. But it could maybe be about liberation in a larger sense from all the different divides in our lives. Any thoughts about that?
I would just say, if you've ever visited Southwest United States, you'll notice all the cities have Spanish names, and that's because that was all part of Mexico, and it was that land that was stolen from Mexico in what General Grant called the most unfair war waged by a powerful country on a weak country. And Texas to California was all Spanish. It's still Spanish speaking. So a lot of people. I mean, so that's a start. Like we can recognize that was stolen.
Thank you.
I think that I love what you're saying, and I do think that, I mean, when I was thinking about this panel, it occurred to me that, we have our own camps in Baltimore in terms of all the people that are in jail here.
Thank
for
you.
gruesome, gruesome things, and so many people that are serving sentences for violation of probation, for testimony that was offered by officers that have been federally indicted. I mean, there's a lot of injustice in this city as well, and I think that you're totally right. Those same fences are being used, and people are profiting off them here in Baltimore just as they are on the border. So the line that you're drawing is perfect.
It seems we have one last question.
Sorry, my name's David. I work here at the Real News Network, just full disclosure on that one. I was curious if you guys had any thoughts about the Real ID that's coming into effect. So I know that there's undocumenteds that can obtain driver's license in Maryland since 2013, but Real ID is now going to require you to have 4 different types of documentation in order to obtain them. And the statutory law means that Maryland police are supposed to confiscate whatever ID you have after a certain deadline if it doesn't meet the standard. So I was just wondering if there's any thoughts or fear about that in the community.
Hi, my name is Katie Miller. I work for the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. I just wanted to let everyone know that our city law department and our city lawyer, the city solicitor, are working on that in terms of trying to prevent Baltimore City Police from confiscating IDs, because we do recognize that it is unnecessarily discriminatory against those who are undocumented, because their ability to provide the forms of identification is very limited. So at this point, Baltimore City Police should not be confiscating IDs because of the discriminatory nature against immigrants. I'm happy to provide updates as that moves forward, but it's really only recently come to our attention that the Real ID is very discriminatory in this way.
And Jared, we were talking before the event, we were talking about how ICE is using MVA databases in several states to get names of people that might not have status. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of clients that have removal orders, or they are the standing deportation order against them for one reason or another, ask me, should I get a driver's license? Because they got to drive. And it's a tough question, and a story came out yesterday that ICE has been using facial recognition to scan the MVA databases. And that facial recognition, by the way, is also in part powered by Amazon. But, so, listen, I think that undocumented immigrants right now, as the weakest group on this issue, are the first group to really get targeted, and we're seeing the effects, and they're being torn out of their houses because they want to actually drive with a license, because they want to insure their cars, they want to be in the system and do the right thing. They're getting punished for that, but it's part of a larger conversation that Americans need to have about how much we want our government to be able to search every database and do whatever they want with it, use these sort of technologies against us and our neighbors that, I mean, we haven't begun to even address in Europe. They've done a lot better there, and it's something we need to do, but we haven't done anything about it.
So on that note, I want to thank you. Well, first of all, let's give a big round of applause for our panel.
Thank you.
And a big round of applause for everyone that showed up today. We really appreciate you guys coming out. You can talk to Taya or Steven or any one of the other Real News staff here if you have ideas for what programming you want to see on our site or a future event, Real Talk though. But thank you all for joining us, and hope to see you guys again soon. And again, remember, tip your server, please. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.